The chrome on Kwame Asonte's Bugatti Chiron gleamed under the harsh Lagos sun as smoke billowed from its engine bay. Nigeria's youngest tech billionaire stood helpless on Victoria Island's busiest street, watching his $3 million pride crumble before a crowd of onlookers with their phones out, recording his humiliation. "Sir, we cannot fix this," stammered Emeka, the city's most expensive mechanic, wiping grease from his trembling hands. "The electrical system is completely fried. Maybe if we ship it to Europe." Kwame's jaw tightened. This wasn't just any car breakdown. This was supposed to be his grand entrance to the charity gala where he'd announce his engagement to Adunni Fashola, daughter of Lagos State's former governor. Instead, he was stranded like a common man, his reputation bleeding with every social media post capturing his predicament. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. The crowd grew thicker. Street vendors hawked their wares, children pressed against the car's windows, and Lagos traffic honked impatiently around the spectacle. Kwame's phone buzzed with concerned calls from business partners, but he couldn't answer, not while standing beside his smoking symbol of success like a fool. "Oga, make I try called out a weathered voice from the crowd. Kwame turned to see an elderly woman pushing through the mass of bodies. Her wrapper was faded but clean, her pregnant belly evident beneath the worn fabric. Her name tag read Ngozi, from a cleaning company he didn't recognize. She couldn't have been more than 25, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd seen too much, too young. "Madam, I beg, this is not your business." Emeka dismissed her with a wave. "This car cost more than your entire family will see in 10 lifetimes. But Ngozi ignored him, approaching the smoking engine with purpose. "I know cars. My father was a mechanic before." She trailed off, but her hands were already moving with confidence among the complex machinery. Kwame watched, transfixed, as this homeless pregnant woman did what Lagos's best mechanics couldn't. Within minutes, her fingers found connections others had missed, rerouted systems with an expertise that defied her appearance. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life with its familiar purr. The crowd erupted in amazement. Phone cameras swiveled from Kwame's embarrassment to Ngozi's triumph. She stepped back, wiping her hands on a rag that materialized from her wrapper's folds. "How?" Kwame stammered, his pride warring with desperate gratitude. "Sometimes the most expensive solutions hide the simplest problems," Ngozi replied, her Igbo accent thick with exhaustion. "Your ground wire was loose. Happens to the best of us." As Kwame fumbled for his wallet, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his rescue, Ngozi had already begun melting back into the crowd. But not before their eyes met for one electric moment, hers filled with a pain that matched his own recent heartbreak, though he didn't yet understand why. "Wait," he called out, but she was gone, swallowed by Lagos's endless human tide. What Kwame didn't know was that this wasn't their first meeting. And as he drove toward his engagement announcement, Ngozi's trembling hands pressed against her growing belly, protecting the secret that would soon destroy everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the woman he was about to marry. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. 6 months earlier, Kwame Asonte had been a different man entirely. Standing in his penthouse office overlooking Lagos Island, he'd been on top of the world. His tech company Asonte Pay had just secured a 2 billion naira government contract, making him the youngest person on Forbes' Africa's billionaire list. "Baby, you're not even listening to me," Adunni's voice cut through his reflection on success. She stood by his mahogany desk, her beauty still capable of stopping traffic in Victoria Island's business district, but her tone carried the sharp edge that had become too familiar. Adani Fashola was everything Lagos society expected in a billionaire's wife. Connections that reached the highest levels of government, a law degree from Oxford, and the kind of elegance that graced magazine covers. Her father's political influence had opened doors that even Kwame's billions couldn't unlock. "I'm listening," Kwame lied, turning from the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased his empire. "You want to hire more security for the wedding." "Not just any security." Adani's manicured fingers drummed against his desk. "Daddy's people. The ones who understand. Discretion." There it was again, that word that had begun punctuating too many of their conversations. Discretion about the wedding guest list that somehow excluded most of his family. Discretion about the prenuptial agreement her lawyers kept revising. Discretion about why she needed her own wing of his Ikoyi mansion. "Adani, sometimes I feel like I'm marrying Lagos politics instead of the woman I love." Her laugh was crystalline and cold. "Darling, you can't separate the two. That's what makes us perfect together. Your money, my connections. It's what this city runs on." Before Kwame could respond, his secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sir, there's a young woman here about the cleaning contract. She says it's urgent." "Send her in," Kwame replied, grateful for the interruption. Ngozi entered carrying a folder and wearing a cleaning company uniform that was too large for her slight frame. She was barely showing then, maybe 3 months along, but something about her presence commanded attention despite her humble circumstances. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Ngozi Okafor from Clean Sweep Services. We discussed the contract for your residential properties." As she spoke, outlining cleaning schedules and staff assignments, Kwame found himself studying her face. There was an intelligence in her eyes that seemed incongruous with her position, a quiet dignity that reminded him of his grandmother back in Kumasi. "The girl can handle the paperwork later," Adani interrupted dismissively. "We have important matters to discuss." But Ngozi had already noticed something that made her freeze. On Kwame's desk, partially hidden under some files, was a photograph from a charity event. In it, Adani stood laughing with a man whose face made Ngozi's blood run cold. Chinedu Okafor, her husband. Her missing husband who'd abandoned her when she'd told him about the pregnancy. The folder slipped from Ngozi's hands, scattering invoices across the marble floor. As she bent to collect them, fighting back tears and nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness, she caught fragments of whispered conversation between the couple. "Told you the investigation would be discreet. Can't have this coming out before the election. The girl doesn't suspect anything." When Ngozi straightened, Adani was watching her with the calculating stare of a predator who'd noticed something amiss in her territory. "Is everything all right, miss?" "Mrs. Okafor," Ngozi replied quietly, testing the reaction. If Adani recognized the surname, she didn't show it. But Kwame noticed the way his fiancé's fingers unconsciously moved to her phone, as if memorizing details for later use. "Mrs. Okafor will be handling the deep cleaning of your properties," Kwame said, signing the contract. "Including the Ikoyi house." As Ngozi left with the signed agreement, she clutched the evidence of her husband's betrayal like a burning coal. The cleaning contract would give her access to the very house where Chinedu was undoubtedly hiding his double life. What she didn't know was that Adani was already planning to eliminate any threats to her carefully constructed future, starting with pregnant cleaning ladies who asked too many questions and looked at their husbands' photographs with recognition in their eyes. The domestic betrayal that would destroy both women's lives had already begun, set in motion by a simple cleaning contract and a photograph left carelessly on a billionaire's desk. The Ikoyi mansion sprawled across 2 acres of prime Lagos real estate, its modern architecture a testament to new money trying to establish old roots. Ngozi arrived for her first cleaning shift at dawn, when the house staff was minimal and the shadows still offered sanctuary for secrets. She'd spent sleepless nights since signing the contract, her mind racing with possibilities. Was Chinedu living here? Had he been Aduni's lover all along? The questions tormented her more than morning sickness ever could. "You must be the new cleaner," said Folake, the head housekeeper, a middle-aged Yoruba woman whose suspicious eyes missed nothing. "Madam Aduni gave specific instructions about your duties." The instructions were clear. Ngozi was restricted to the guest wing and common areas. The master suite and Aduni's private offices were strictly off-limits. But restrictions had never stopped a woman desperate for truth. As she moved through the mansion's opulent rooms, Ngozi's trained eye catalogued details that spoke of infidelity. Men's clothing in sizes too small for Kwame's tall frame hung in a guest bedroom closet. Toiletries that weren't Kwame's lined a bathroom counter. Most damning of all, a distinctive cologne lingered in the air, the same one Chinedu had worn on their wedding day. Her hands trembled as she dusted a side table, knocking over a small picture frame. As she righted it, her world tilted on its axis. The photograph showed Aduni and Chinedu at what looked like a private dinner, their bodies pressed together in unmistakable intimacy. They weren't trying to hide their affair. They were celebrating it. "What are you doing in here?" Ngozi spun to find Aduni standing in the doorway, her designer dress immaculate despite the early hour. Her eyes moved from Ngozi's face to the photograph still clutched in trembling hands. "I was just cleaning, ma'am." The picture fell and, "Give it to me." Aduni's voice carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. As Ngozi handed over the evidence of her husband's betrayal, their fingers touched briefly. The contact sent an electric shock of recognition through both women. Two wives unknowingly sharing the same man, their lives entangled in a web of domestic betrayal neither fully understood yet. "You look familiar," Aduni said, studying Ngozi's face with renewed interest. "Have we met before?" "No, ma'am. I don't think so." But Aduni's lawyer-trained mind was already connecting dots. The surname Okafor. The way this woman had looked at Chinedu's photograph in Kwame's office. The nervous energy that radiated from her like guilt made manifest. "Tell me about your husband, Ngozi. What does he do?" The question landed like a physical blow. Ngozi's hand instinctively moved to her growing belly, protecting the child whose father had abandoned them both for the sophisticated woman standing before her. He travels for work. Import business." "Import business," Aduni repeated, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "How fascinating. My friend Chinedu is also in imports. Perhaps they know each other." The name hung between them like a loaded gun. Ngozi's sharp intake of breath confirmed what Aduni had already suspected. This pregnant cleaning woman wasn't just any threat to her carefully constructed life. She was Chinedu's wife. The inconvenient truth he'd assured her was handled. "I should get back to work," Ngozi whispered, reaching for her cleaning supplies with hands that shook like leaves in a storm. "Yes, you should," Aduni agreed, but her tone suggested that cleaning was the least of Ngozi's concerns. "And Ngozi, I'd be very careful about where you clean next. Some spaces are more dangerous than others." As Aduni glided away on silent designer heels, Ngozi collapsed onto the sofa she'd been dusting, her body finally rebelling against the emotional shock. She was trapped in a mansion owned by her husband's lover, carrying his child while he planned to marry another woman, with no one to turn to and nowhere to run. But what neither woman realized was that Kwame had been watching the entire confrontation from his home office's security monitors, his face growing darker with each revelation about the woman he'd planned to marry. The infidelity that had started as a simple affair was about to explode into something far more devastating than either wife could imagine. Comment your thoughts on this betrayal. Have you ever discovered a partner's cheating in such a shocking way? Let us know below. Kwame sat in his study, staring at the security footage he'd just witnessed. The conversation between Adunni and the pregnant cleaning woman played on repeat in his mind, each viewing adding another layer to his growing suspicion. The name, Chinedu, echoed in his head like a funeral bell. His phone buzzed with a text from Adunni. "Darling, we need to discuss the wedding caterers. Can't wait to see you tonight. XOXO. The casualness of her deception made his stomach turn. How long had she been playing him? How many times had she looked into his eyes and professed love while carrying on with another man? A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Come in." Ngozi entered, moving more carefully than before, her cleaning supplies clutched like armor against the emotional battlefield this house had become. "Sir, I wanted to apologize for earlier. I know I overstepped boundaries in the guest wing." Kwame studied her face, seeing past the humble exterior to the intelligence and pain beneath. This woman held answers to questions he wasn't even sure he wanted to ask. "Sit down, Ngozi. Please." "Sir, I couldn't. I'm working." "I said sit down." His tone brooked no argument, but not unkindly. "Tell me about Chinedu Okafor." The color drained from Ngozi's face like water from a broken vessel. Her hands moved protectively to her belly, and Kwame's worst fears crystallized into horrible certainty. "He's your husband, isn't he?" The simple question broke something inside Ngozi. Months of carrying the burden alone, of wondering where her husband had gone, of struggling with pregnancy and poverty while he lived in luxury. It all came pouring out in a rush of tears and words. "He left me when I told him about the baby. Said he needed time to think, to figure things out. That was 6 months ago. I've been calling, searching, trying to understand what I did wrong." Her voice cracked like thin ice. "I never imagined he was here, with her, planning to marry your fiancé while I was wondering if we had enough money for prenatal vitamins." Kwame felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. "Show me your marriage certificate." With trembling fingers, Ngozi retrieved the document from her bag. The official seal, the signatures, the date, all authentic. Chinedu Okafor had married this woman 2 years ago, making his upcoming wedding to Adunni not just adultery, but bigamy. "Does Adunni know you're married to him?" She figured it out today. The way she looked at me. Ngozi shuddered. "I'm scared, sir. I don't know what she might do." Before Kwame could respond, voices echoed from the mansion's main entrance. Adunni's laughter, bright and false, mixed with a deeper male voice that made Ngozi's breath catch. "He's here," she whispered. Through the study's French doors, they watched Chinedu Okafor stride across the terrace like he owned the place. He was handsome in the way that had initially attracted Ngozi. Tall, confident, with a kind of smile that promised everything and delivered nothing. Now she could see the calculating coldness in his eyes that love had once blinded her to. Adunni wrapped her arms around him, their kiss passionate and public, a performance for any watching eyes. But it was Chinedu's hands that told the real story. Possessive, familiar, mapping territory he'd clearly claimed long ago. "How long?" Kwame asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Based on what I've seen in this house? Months. Maybe longer." Ngozi's pain had crystallized into something harder. "He's been living a double life, using me as cover while pursuing her. And she's been using you as cover while pursuing him." The full scope of the deception hit Kwame like a physical blow. He wasn't just the victim of infidelity. He was the unwitting financier of his own betrayal. His money had paid for the mansion where his fiancée conducted her affair. His business connections had legitimized Chinedu's presence in Lagos's elite circles. His love had been the perfect camouflage for their treachery. "What are we going to do?" Ngozi asked, but she already knew the answer in Kwame's eyes. War. They were going to war. First, we're going to document everything. Photos, recordings, evidence that will stand up in court. Kwame's voice was steady now, the shock transforming into cold determination. Then we're going to destroy them the way they tried to destroy us. As if summoned by their plotting, Aduni's voice drifted through the house. "Chinedu, darling, have you seen that little cleaning girl around? We might have a problem." The battle lines were drawn. Two betrayed spouses against two calculating lovers, with pregnancy, bigamy, and billions at stake. The emotional manipulation that had started this mess was about to meet its match in a revenge story that would shake Lagos society to its foundations. That night, Kwame's Ikoyi mansion hummed with deceptive normalcy. The dinner party Aduni had organized was in full swing, Lagos's elite mingling on the terrace while staff circulated with champagne and canapés. But beneath the surface of social pleasantries, a different kind of gathering was taking place. Ngozi moved through the crowd like a ghost, her cleaning uniform rendering her invisible to the guests who saw only the help. But tonight, invisibility was power. Hidden in her supplies was a small recording device Kwame had provided, and her keen eyes catalogued every interaction between Aduni and Chinedu. "The Okafor situation needs to be resolved quickly," Aduni murmured to Chinedu as they stood near the pool, thinking they were out of earshot. "She's become a liability." "What do you want me to do? Divorce her officially?" Chinedu's voice carried the lazy confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences for his actions. "Divorce implies she was ever legitimately your wife. I'm thinking more permanent solutions." Ngozi's blood ran cold as she processed the implied threat. These people weren't just cheating. They were discussing how to eliminate her entirely. Her hand moved to her belly, protecting the life growing inside her from parents who saw both of them as obstacles to remove. From across the terrace, Kwame watched the exchange through the lens of a high-powered camera. Each whispered word, each casual touch between his fiancée and her lover, was being documented for the reckoning to come. But it was the predatory way Aduni kept glancing toward Ngozi that made his anger crystallize into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. "Kwame, darling." Aduni materialized beside him, her hand sliding possessively onto his arm. "You look so serious. This is supposed to be a celebration. What are we celebrating, exactly?" The question came out sharper than he'd intended. "Us, obviously. Our future. Our beautiful life together." Her smile was perfect, practiced, completely fake. "I've been thinking about the honeymoon." Chinedu suggested this lovely resort in the Maldives. "He has such good taste in these things." The casual way she dropped her lover's name into their conversation, using him as a source of romantic advice for their wedding, was a special kind of cruelty that left Kwame momentarily speechless. "Speaking of Chinedu, where is he tonight? I'd like to thank him for all his suggestions." "Oh, he's around somewhere. You know how he is. Always working, always networking." Aduni's laugh was too bright, too quick. "Actually, I should go find him. There's something important we need to discuss." As she glided away, Kwame noticed Ngozi watching from across the terrace. Their eyes met, and he saw his own pain reflected there. The helpless fury of discovering that the people you loved had been systematically destroying you while smiling to your face. An hour later, the guests began to leave, their conversations fading into the Lagos night. Kwame retreated to his study, ostensibly to handle some urgent business calls, but really to review the evidence they'd gathered. The recordings, the photographs, the documented timeline of deception. It was all there, enough to ruin both Adunni and Chinedu completely. A soft knock interrupted his planning. "Come in." Ngozi entered, her uniform stained with exhaustion and stress. "I heard them talking again, sir. They're planning something. Tomorrow night, they want me to work late, clean the East Wing alone." "It's a trap." The certainty in Kwame's voice made her shiver. "They want you isolated, vulnerable. What should I do?" Before Kwame could answer, the study door burst open. Chinedu stood there, his earlier confidence replaced by the dangerous energy of a cornered animal. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said, his eyes moving between Kwame and Ngozi. "Having cozy conversations with my wife." "Your wife?" Kwame stood slowly, his full height giving him a physical advantage over the other man. "The same wife you abandoned when she told you about the baby? The same wife you've been betraying while you screw my fiancé in my own house." Chinedu's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "You don't understand the complexities of the situation." "I understand perfectly. You're a bigamist and a coward who uses women for their resources, then discards them when they become inconvenient. And you're a fool who's about to lose everything you've worked for." Chinedu's smile was razor-sharp with malice. "Do you really think Adunni chose you for love? Your fortune, your connections, your political influence. That's what she's marrying. I'm just the consolation prize she gets to keep on the side." The words hit their target, but instead of crumbling, Kwame felt his resolve harden into something unbreakable. "Then I guess you'll both be disappointed when there's nothing left to marry." Chinedu's expression shifted to confusion, then growing alarm as he recognized the trap closing around him. "What have you done?" "What you should have expected when you decided to wage war against people who actually love each other instead of just using each other." As Chinedu lunged forward in desperate fury, Ngozi stepped between them, her pregnancy making her brave in ways she'd never imagined. "Stop. This won't solve anything." But the confrontation had already spiraled beyond anyone's control, and outside in the mansion's corridors, Adunni was making phone calls that would escalate their private war into something public, devastating, and irreversible. The power plays that had started as simple infidelity were about to become a battle that would destroy reputations, fortunes, and lives across Lagos society. The next morning, Lagos woke up to a scandal that dominated every newspaper, blog, and social media platform in the city. "Billionaire's fiancé in bigamy scandal," screamed the headlines, accompanied by photos that left nothing to interpretation. Adunni and Chinedu in passionate embraces, Ngozi's marriage certificate, and financial records showing how Kwame's money had funded the affair. At the Asante Pay headquarters, Kwame's board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy as Lagos's most powerful investors tried to distance themselves from the unfolding catastrophe. "Kwame, this is a disaster," announced Chief Ogundamu, the board's chairman and a family friend for over 20 years. "The government contract is in jeopardy. The central bank is asking questions about your personal financial management. We need damage control, and we need it now." "The damage is already done," Kwame replied calmly, though his eyes held the flat coldness of a man who'd lost everything worth protecting. "The question is whether we're going to let them destroy us completely, or if we're going to fight back." Meanwhile, across the city in a cramped Surrealist apartment, Ngozi watched the news coverage with a mixture of terror and grim satisfaction. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and strangers wanting to know her side of the story. But the call she was waiting for came from an unexpected source. "Mrs. Okafor? This is Barrister Adebayo from Chambers. I represent several women who've been financially defrauded by your husband. We'd like to speak with you about joining a class action lawsuit." As it turned out, Chinedu's pattern of deception extended far beyond just two wives. Over the past 5 years, he'd seduced and swindled at least 7 women across Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, using fake businesses and emotional manipulation to extract money, property, and trust before disappearing. He told each of us we were the love of his life, explained Kemi, a widow from Ikoyi who'd lost her late husband's insurance money to Chinedu's import business scam. He had wedding photographs with 3 of us. Marriage certificates with at least 5. The revelation recontextualized everything. Chinedu wasn't just an opportunistic cheater. He was a career criminal who'd turned romantic fraud into an art form. And Adunni, rather than being another victim, had been his willing accomplice, using her legal training and political connections to help him target wealthy, vulnerable women. At the Fashola family compound in Victoria Island, Adunni's father paced his study like a caged leopard. Chief Senator Fashola had built his political empire on a reputation for integrity and family values. His daughter's public disgrace threatened to unravel decades of careful cultivation. "You've destroyed us," he told Adunni, his voice shaking with rage and disappointment. "Do you understand what you've done? The governor's race, the senatorial appointments, the business contracts. It's all gone because you couldn't keep your legs closed." "Daddy, I can fix this," Adunni pleaded, her usual composure finally cracking under the weight of consequences. "Chinedu and I have a plan. We can discredit the pregnant girl, make it look like she's lying for money." "There is no plan." Chief Fashola's roar echoed through the compound. "There is no Chinedu. The man doesn't exist. He's a ghost with false papers and fabricated credentials. Your lover is a professional con artist who played you like he played every other woman stupid enough to trust him." The truth hit Adunni like a physical blow. All those months of passion, of planning their future together, of believing herself to be his partner in crime. She'd been just another mark, another wealthy woman to be used and discarded. But the cruelest revelation was yet to come. "Madam Adunni," her house girl announced hesitantly, "there's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Mrs. Chinedu Okafor. The first one." Standing in the compound's reception area was an elegant woman in her 40s, her bearing regal despite the pain in her eyes. This was the real Mrs. Chinedu Okafor, his actual first wife, married 12 years ago in Enugu, abandoned 7 years ago when she couldn't conceive children. "I've been following the news," the woman said quietly. "I thought you should know that you're not his second wife. You're not even his 5th. You're just the latest in a very long line of women who believed his lies about love and forever." As the full scope of Chinedu's deception unraveled, one fact became crystal clear. Every woman in his wake had been left broken, betrayed, and bearing the consequences of trusting a man who viewed love as a weapon and marriage as a business transaction. The co-parenting tension that had started this story was nothing compared to the web of abandoned children, devastated families, and shattered lives that Chinedu had left scattered across Nigeria like landmines waiting to explode. Share this story if you've ever been deceived by someone you trusted. What would you do to get revenge? Comment below. The courtroom in Lagos High Court buzzed with unprecedented energy. What had started as a private scandal had exploded into the most sensational legal case in recent Nigerian history, pitting some of the country's most powerful families against each other in a battle that would reshape how society viewed marriage, money, and justice. Ngozi sat in the witness stand, her pregnancy now visible even beneath her conservative dress. 6 months of stress and legal preparation had transformed her from a humble cleaning woman into an unlikely symbol of resilience. Beside her sat barrister Funmi Akand, one of Lagos's most feared litigation lawyers, who'd taken the case pro bono after being moved by the scope of the deception. "Mrs. Okafor," Barrister Akand began, "please tell the court about the last time you saw your husband before his disappearance." Ngozi's voice was steady despite the weight of a dozen cameras focused on her. He told me he was going to Abuja for a business meeting. Said he'd be back in a week with good news about our future. That was 8 months ago. I later learned he was moving in with Miss Fashola that same day. On the defense side, Adunni sat between two of Nigeria's most expensive lawyers, her designer suit unable to hide the desperation in her eyes. The woman who'd once commanded every room she entered now looked diminished, haunted by the realization that she'd been played as expertly as every other woman in Chinedu's wake. "Your Honor," declared Chief Olumide, Adunni's lead counsel, "my client is as much a victim in this matter as anyone else. She was deceived by Mr. Okafor's false representations about his marital status." But the prosecution had evidence that told a different story. Financial records showed Adunni had helped Chinedu access credit facilities using forged documents. Phone recordings revealed her coaching him on how to manipulate other women. Most damning of all, they had video evidence of her discussing permanent solutions to the Ngozi problem. "Miss Fashola knew exactly what she was doing," countered the lead prosecutor. "She wasn't a victim of romance fraud. She was an active participant in a criminal conspiracy that destroyed families across multiple states." As testimony continued, the full scope of Chinedu's operation became clear. He hadn't just been collecting wives. He'd been building a network of financially dependent women whose resources he could tap at will. The import business was fake, but the money he'd extracted was real, totaling over 200 million naira across 7 states. During a recess, Ngozi found herself face-to-face with Adunni in the courthouse bathroom. For a moment, the two women stared at each other, their shared victimhood creating an odd intimacy despite the legal battle raging between them. "I never meant for it to go this far," Adunni said quietly, her polished facade finally cracking completely. "I thought I was in control. I thought I was the one using him." "We all thought that," Ngozi replied, placing a protective hand over her belly. "That's what made him so dangerous. He made each of us feel like we were special, like we were the exception to every rule that had hurt us before. Do you think—" Adunni's voice broke slightly. "Do you think he ever felt anything real for any of us?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Both women knew the answer, but neither wanted to voice it. Chinedu Okafor was incapable of genuine emotion. He was a predator who'd learned to mimic love so perfectly that even he might have believed his own performance. "Where is he now?" Ngozi asked. "Gone. Vanished the night before the story broke. Left me to face everything alone, just like he did to you." When court resumed, the prosecution called their final witness, Kwame Asante himself. His testimony was devastating in its clinical precision, methodically destroying any remaining sympathy for the defendants. "Miss Fashola didn't just betray our engagement," he told the packed courtroom. "She used my home as headquarters for a criminal enterprise that targeted vulnerable women across Nigeria. She used my money to fund operations that destroyed families. She used my reputation to legitimize a man who was nothing more than a sophisticated thief." But it was his final statement that resonated most powerfully with the watching crowds. "This case isn't really about infidelity or broken hearts. It's about whether we'll allow predators to operate with impunity in our society, or whether we'll protect the innocent people they target." Mrs. Ngozi Okafor didn't just lose a husband. She nearly lost everything, including her life, because two people decided her existence was inconvenient to their plans. As the judge called for a recess to consider sentencing, Nigeria held its collective breath. The public disgrace of two of Lagos's most prominent families had become a referendum on justice, gender, and power in modern Africa. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered with signs supporting Ngozi and demanding justice for Chinedu's other victims. The case had tapped into something deeper than scandal. It had become a symbol of hope for every woman who'd ever been betrayed, abandoned, or made to feel worthless by someone who claimed to love them. But inside the courthouse, a Dunny's phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. Still watching from afar. Ready to come home when this blows over. See. Chinedu was still out there, still pulling strings, still manipulating the situation from the shadows. And he was planning his return. Don't miss what happens next. Like and subscribe for the shocking conclusion to this incredible story. 3 weeks after the trial's conclusion, Ngozi thought she could finally breathe again. The court had sentenced Adunni to 5 years for fraud and conspiracy, while issuing an international warrant for Chinedu's arrest. The financial restitution from Kwame's civil suit would ensure her baby would never want for anything. Justice, it seemed, had finally prevailed. She was wrong. The attack came at midnight in her new Ikoyi apartment, a gift from Kwame, who'd insisted she needed better security. The power went out first, plunging the building into darkness. Then came the sound of her front door being expertly picked, followed by footsteps too familiar for comfort. "Hello, my beautiful wife." Chinedu emerged from the shadows like a specter from her worst nightmares, but 3 months in hiding had changed him. Gone was the polished charm that had seduced so many women. In its place was something harder, more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose. "How did you get past security?" Ngozi whispered, her hand instinctively moving to protect her now 7-month belly. "I built this security system, remember? Back when I was planning to live here with Adunni after she divorced that tech billionaire." His smile was all teeth and malice. "Amazing how quickly tables turn, isn't it?" Ngozi backed toward her bedroom, where her phone lay charging. But Chinedu moved faster, blocking her escape with predatory grace. "I've been watching the trial, you know. Very touching testimony. You almost had me believing I was the villain in this story." He circled her slowly, like a hunter toying with wounded prey. "But we both know the truth, don't we? You were never innocent in this. You were just another woman trying to trap a man with pregnancy and tears." "I never trapped you. I loved you. I thought we were building a life together." "Love." He laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "You want to know what love is, Ngozi? Love is what Adunni and I had. Pure partnership. No messy emotions, no unrealistic expectations. Just mutual benefit and perfect understanding." "She testified against you. She called you a monster." For the first time, genuine emotion flickered across Chinedu's face, hurt, quickly masked by rage. She was protecting herself. Smart woman. "That's why I chose her over all the others, including you." "Then why are you here? Why aren't you with her?" The question hit its mark. Chinedu's composure cracked slightly, revealing the desperation beneath his bravado. "Because she's in prison. Because your boyfriend made sure my perfect life was destroyed. Because everyone I trusted betrayed me when things got difficult. The way you betrayed everyone who trusted you." The slap came without warning, sending Ngozi stumbling against the wall. Stars exploded behind her eyes as she struggled to stay upright, one hand pressed to her reddening cheek, the other protecting her unborn child. "Don't lecture me about betrayal," Chinedu snarled. "I gave you the best 2 years of my life. I married you when no other man would look at you twice. I put a roof over your head and food in your belly, and this is how you repay me? By destroying everything I worked for. You left me. You abandoned us both when I needed you most. I was building our future. Every woman, every connection, every dollar I collected. It was all for us, for the family we were going to build together. But you couldn't wait. You couldn't trust the process. You had to go running to rich men and lawyers, crying about abandonment and betrayal. The twisted logic of his justification was almost more frightening than his physical presence. In his mind, he wasn't a criminal who defrauded multiple women. He was a provider whose sacrifices had been misunderstood. He wasn't a bigamist who'd collected wives like trophies. He was a man building an empire for his family's future. "What do you want, Chinedu?" "I want what's mine." His hand moved to her belly with possessive familiarity. "You." "The baby." A chance to start over somewhere new, away from all this mess. "I'll never go anywhere with you. You don't have a choice." He pulled a passport from his jacket, hers, somehow obtained despite being under police protection. "We're leaving tonight. Flight to Dubai, then connection to somewhere without extradition treaties. A new life for our little family." "I'll scream. The neighbors will call security." "Go ahead. Scream all you want." His smile was genuinely terrifying now. The security guards are currently dealing with a gas leak in the building's main system. Very dangerous. Everyone's been evacuated except the residents of this floor, and those residents aren't answering their doors anymore. The implication hit her like ice water. The elderly couple next door, the young family across the hall. What had he done to them? "You're insane." "I'm committed." "There's a difference." He moved toward her with predatory purpose. "Pack a bag. Just essentials. We have a plane to catch." But as Chinedu reached for her, the apartment's front door exploded inward with a crash that shook the entire building. Kwame burst through the splintered remains, flanked by private security guards whose presence transformed the apartment into a battleground. "Get away from her," Kwame commanded, his voice carrying the cold authority of a man who'd spent months planning this moment. Chinedu's hand moved to something concealed in his jacket. "The knight in shining armor arrives." How predictable. The tracking device in her apartment triggered an alert the moment you arrived. "We've been waiting for you to make exactly this mistake." "What tracking device?" Ngozi asked, confused. "The one I had installed in every property connected to this case," Kwame replied without taking his eyes off Chinedu. "I knew he'd come back eventually. Men like him always do. They can't resist the urge to reclaim what they think belongs to them." But Chinedu had one final card to play, and he drew it with the desperate fury of a cornered animal. The inner conflict that had driven him to create this web of deception was about to explode into violence that would threaten not just Ngozi's life, but the future of the child she carried. The gun appeared in Chinedu's hand like a magic trick, its black metal gleaming under the apartment's emergency lighting. The security guards froze, their own weapons useless with Ngozi positioned directly between them and their target. "Everyone stays very still," Chinedu announced, his voice unnaturally calm despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "We're going to finish this conversation without any more interruptions." "Chinedu, think about what you're doing," Kwame said carefully, his hands raised in surrender. "There are witnesses now. Security cameras. You can't disappear again after this." "I never wanted to disappear in the first place." The facade of control cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. "I had everything planned perfectly. Multiple income streams, multiple safety nets, multiple futures to choose from. I was building an empire that would have supported all of us. Wives, children, everyone I cared about." "By lying to everyone?" "By stealing from families." Ngozi's voice shook with pain and disbelief. "By abandoning pregnant women when they became inconvenient?" "I never abandoned anyone. I was managing resources, managing timing, managing complex relationships that simple people couldn't understand." His grip on the gun tightened dangerously. "Do you think traditional marriage works in modern Nigeria? Do you think one woman, one income, one life plan is enough to build real wealth, real security?" The twisted reasoning behind his actions began to emerge like poison from a wound. In Chinedu's mind, he hadn't been a criminal. He'd been an entrepreneur of emotions, diversifying his romantic portfolio to maximize returns for everyone involved. Each wife had been an investment, each child a future asset, each deception a calculated business decision. "I was going to take care of everyone," he continued, the gun wavering slightly as his conviction warred with his grip. "Ngozi would have had the apartment in Lekki. Adunni would have had the political connections. The others would have had their specialized benefits. A perfect system where everyone got what they needed. Except honesty," Kwame said quietly. "Except choice. Except the right to know who they were really married to. Choice is a luxury for people who don't understand optimization. I gave them better lives than they would have had otherwise. I gave them security, status, purpose. You gave them lies." Ngozi's fury finally overwhelmed her fear. "You made me think I was worthless, that I'd driven away the only man who could ever love me. You made me question my sanity, my judgment, my right to exist in your world." For a moment, something almost like recognition flickered in Chinedu's eyes. He saw her pain, acknowledged the damage he'd caused, understood that his grand design had crushed the very people it was supposed to elevate. Then the moment passed, and desperation reasserted itself. "It doesn't matter now. The experiment failed because none of you could see the bigger picture. But I can still salvage something from the wreckage." He gestured toward the door with the gun. "We're leaving. Tonight. The three of us are going to start over somewhere new, and this time, I'll make sure there are no outside interferences." "She's not going anywhere with you," Kwame stated with quiet finality. "You don't get a vote in this, rich boy. You think your money makes you her protector? You think your resources give you rights over my family? I think her choice gives her rights over her own life." The simple truth of it stopped Chinedu cold. In all his calculations, all his optimizations, all his grand strategies for managing human resources, he'd never once considered that the women he'd collected might have agency of their own. "Choice," he repeated, the word foreign in his mouth. "What choice do any of us really have? I was born poor in Enugu. My father abandoned us when I was 12. My mother worked herself to death trying to feed 5 children. I chose to be something more than a victim of circumstance." "So you made other people victims instead," Ngozi said softly. "I made other people beneficiaries. Do you think you would have had a better life without me? Do you think you would have found someone else to love you, support you, give you a child?" The cruelty of the question took everyone's breath away. Even in this moment of desperate justification, Chinedu couldn't resist one final twist of the knife, making Ngozi question her own worth, her own right to expect better treatment. But something had changed in her during these months of struggle and revelation. The woman who'd once believed herself lucky to be chosen by this man no longer existed. "Yes," she said simply. "I would have found someone who loved me enough to stay. Someone who valued honesty enough to tell me the truth. Someone who understood that real love doesn't require deception to flourish." Her eyes moved to Kwame, and something passed between them. Not romantic love, but something deeper. Mutual respect. Shared understanding. The recognition of two people who'd been betrayed by those they trusted most, and who'd chosen to fight back rather than surrender. Chinedu saw it too, and the sight of it broke something fundamental inside him. The careful control he'd maintained throughout his criminal career finally shattered completely. "If I can't have you," he whispered, raising the gun toward Ngozi's heart, "then no one can." The shot that rang out in the small apartment was deafening, final, and completely unexpected. But it wasn't Chinedu who fired it. The smoking gun in Adunni Fashola's hand told the story that would dominate headlines for months to come. She stood in the apartment's shattered doorway, her prison uniform stark against her pale skin, her face a mask of exhaustion and desperate resolve. Chinedu lay crumpled on the floor, his own weapons scattered beyond reach, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps that spoke of mortal wounds and fading time. The man who'd manipulated so many women had been brought down by the one who'd understood his game well enough to play it better. "How did you?" Kwame began. "Prison transport accident," Adunni said tersely, her lawyer's training allowing her to function despite the magnitude of what she'd just done. Very convenient timing. Guards were dealing with multiple casualties, easy to slip away in the confusion. "Why?" Ngozi whispered, her hands pressed protectively over her belly as she stared at the dying man who'd once promised her forever. "Because he was going to kill you. Kill your baby. Kill the only innocent person in this entire mess." Adunni's voice cracked with something that might have been genuine emotion. "I may be many things, but I'm not a murderer of pregnant women and children." Chinedu's eyes found Adunni's face, and for a moment, the predator's mask slipped away entirely. What remained was just a frightened man who'd finally run out of lies to tell himself. "Adunni," he gasped, blood frothing at his lips. "I did love you. Different from the others, but I did love you." "I know," she replied softly. "That's what made it so much worse." As sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second, the full circle of betrayal, revenge, and consequence reached its inevitable conclusion. The man who'd built his life on emotional manipulation lay dying, surrounded by the women he'd tried to control and the man whose resources he'd tried to steal. "The baby," Chinedu whispered, his fading gaze moving to Ngozi's belly. What will you tell?" "The truth," Ngozi said firmly. "That their father was a complicated man who made terrible choices, but that they are wanted and loved regardless of his mistakes. It was more mercy than he deserved, and everyone in the room knew it. But mercy, Ngozi had learned, was something she gave for her own peace, not because it was earned." Chinedu Okafor died as he'd lived, surrounded by the consequences of his choices, leaving behind a trail of broken trust and damaged lives that would take years to fully heal. 6 months later, Ngozi stood in the same Lagos street where this story had begun, watching Kwame's Bugatti purr with mechanical perfection. Her son, Emeka, named for strength and resilience, slept peacefully in her arms, blissfully unaware of the dramatic circumstances that had preceded his birth. "Still can't believe you fixed that car," Kwame said, bouncing the baby gently while Ngozi gathered her things. "Sometimes the most expensive solutions hide the simplest problems," she replied, echoing words spoken in what felt like another lifetime. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had expected. Not romance, but a deep friendship forged in shared trauma and mutual respect. Kwame had established a foundation in Emeka's name, providing support for women victimized by romantic fraud. Ngozi ran the foundation's daily operations, using her experience to identify and assist other women trapped in similar situations. "Any word from Adunni?" Ngozi asked as they walked toward the car. "Reduced sentence for cooperation. She'll be out in 18 months, maybe less with good behavior." Kwame's expression was complex. Not forgiveness, but something approaching understanding. Her testimony helped convict 3 other men running similar schemes across West Africa. "And after she's released? Fresh start. New identity if she wants it. She saved your life, Ngozi. That counts for something." As they drove through Lagos's bustling streets, past the markets and offices and homes where millions of people navigated their own complicated relationships, Ngozi reflected on the lessons embedded in their ordeal. Domestic betrayal, she'd learned, wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the fundamental violation of trust that occurred when people treated love as a commodity to be traded rather than a gift to be cherished. The emotional manipulation that had nearly destroyed her had also taught her to recognize her own strength. The co-parenting tension she'd feared would never exist. Emeka's father was gone, but his legacy of lessons learned would help protect the next generation from similar predators. "What happens now?" she asked as they pulled into the Foundation's offices. "Now we keep working. Keep healing. Keep making sure that what happened to us doesn't happen to others." Kwame smiled at the sleeping baby in her arms. "And we watch this little one grow up knowing he's surrounded by people who fight for truth, even when it's painful." As Ngozi carried her son into their new life, she thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, afraid, dependent, willing to accept crumbs of affection from a man who saw her as disposable. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more valuable than she'd ever imagined possible. The story that had begun with a billionaire's broken car had become something much more significant, a testament to resilience, the power of truth, and the possibility of building authentic relationships after surviving the destruction of false ones. Sometimes the most complex problems really did have simple solutions. Sometimes the people society overlooked possessed exactly the skills needed to fix what seemed irreparable. And sometimes, the end of one story was just the beginning of something much better. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more incredible stories of survival and triumph. Share this story with anyone who needs to know that no matter how dark things seem, there's always hope for a better tomorrow. Comment below with your thoughts on Ngozi's journey from victim to victor. Which part of her story inspired you most? And remember, if you or someone you know is dealing with domestic betrayal or emotional manipulation, you're not alone. There are resources and people ready to help. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey, and we'll see you in the next story.